The Flight Attendant and the Fugitive Part 2. Chapter 4, The Girlfriend Ruse. Zurich's runway shimmered with heat despite the morning chill. The private jet wheels touched down like silk unraveling across marble, silent, smooth, effortless. Alice hadn't said a word the entire descent. Neither had Antony. He sat across from her, legs crossed, elbows resting lightly on the armrests like a king on a floating throne. His sunglasses were back on, matte black with silver frames, making it impossible to tell if he was watching her. But she could feel the awareness in his posture, the attention in his stillness. When the plane finally coasted to a halt outside a sleek, glass-fronted private terminal, Alice stood to do her duties. She'd never signed anything. Never agreed to anything in writing. But the moment she'd stepped into the waiting car in Dubai, something had changed. Her life had snapped along a new axis. No longer Alice Edwards, flight attendant. Now she was something else entirely. The door hissed open with a gentle hydraulic whisper. Antony stood slowly, gathering his suit jacket from the seat beside him. He slipped it on, and as he turned toward her, he spoke, not casually, but like a man giving instructions that had already been decided. "You'll come with me to the hotel." Alice raised an eyebrow. That wasn't the deal. "There's no deal," he said, smoothing the lapel of his jacket. "There's only the job. I'll need you to pose as my girlfriend for the next 24 hours. Possibly 48. She blinked. "You need what?" He was already halfway down the airstairs, calling over his shoulder. "You heard me." The hotel was one of those old money, hyper-exclusive places that didn't advertise, didn't tweet, and didn't post interior photos on the internet. You either knew it, or you didn't. The Hotel Elzac sat on the edge of Lake Zurich, a belle-epoque palace of domes and arches and silent, white-gloved concierges. The entryway smelled like rosewood and chilled mineral water. Even the air felt filtered through a private banker's wallet. Their car, sleek, black, utterly forgettable, pulled up to the front steps, and immediately 3 doormen moved forward in perfect synchronization. One opened the door for Antony. One for Alice. One took her suitcase with a slight bow. No one asked her name. She hadn't spoken since the car. Now, as she stepped onto the polished stone drive and looked up at the wrought iron balconies overhead, she felt something shift inside her. A tight click. Like slipping into someone else's shoes and realizing they fit better than your own. Antony turned toward her once they were inside the gilded lobby. He removed his sunglasses, slow and deliberate. "You'll need to stay close," he said under his breath. "There may be photos. Of me. Of us." Alice swallowed. "And why, exactly, do you need a fake girlfriend?" "Because certain people are more inclined to talk business with a man who appears settled," he said, his eyes scanning the marble floor like he was reading the grain for secrets. "Also, because I'd prefer not to be hit on by the daughters of arms dealers tonight." "Oh," she said lightly, "is it that kind of crowd?" He didn't smile. "Worse. Their suite was a top-floor duplex. Gold leaf ceilings, a grand piano no one had touched in years, and a wraparound terrace with a view of the lake so clean it could have been CGI. Alice didn't have time to marvel. As soon as they entered, 2 stylists appeared. Yes, stylists. One carried garment bags the length of a curtain. The other wheeled in a trunk covered in Italian stickers and dark scuff marks like it had seen more runways than her entire career. "She'll need 2 looks," Antony said, nodding toward her as he loosened his tie. "Cocktail and formal." The stylists barely nodded. Alice opened her mouth. Closed it. Reopened it. I can pick out my own clothes, thank you. But as the zipper unzipped on the first bag, her words vanished. Chanel. Dior. McQueen. Vintage Mugler. It wasn't just fashion. It was costume. It was armor. It was disguise. I have no idea how to walk in these heels, she said, holding one pair like it might bite. Then don't walk, Antony said from the other side of the room, slipping out of his jacket. Float. 2 hours later, they walked into the hotel ballroom through a private entrance guarded by 2 enormous men in tuxedos who did not look like they were here to enjoy the canapés. The party was opulent even by Billionaire standards. Crystal chandeliers. Dom Perignon on ice. Waiters gliding silently with platters of foie gras, oysters, and something molecular that fizzed on the tongue. The crowd was all sharp suits and diamond earrings, accents colliding like brands on a racetrack, French, German, Swiss, American, Russian. Antony's hand brushed lightly against the small of Alice's back as they entered. Just enough to imply intimacy. Just enough to say she's mine. Her breath caught. This was the ruse. The first flash of a camera nearly blinded her. Someone to the left, a woman with lips like glass and a paparazzi's reflexes, had snapped their entrance. Antony turned slightly, leaned toward Alice, and whispered, "Smile." She did. Another flash. The woman leaned in. "Mr. Giordano, it's been too long." "And who is this?" Alice froze. Mr. Giordano. It was the first time she'd heard his real name. Antony didn't blink. "This is Alice," he said, letting the pause hang just long enough to make her skin prickle. "My fiancé." The woman's eyes went wide, then laser-focused. She extended a hand, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I see. So this is the infamous Mrs. Giordano." Alice opened her mouth to correct her. Antony's hand pressed lightly on her waist. She didn't say a word. More champagne. More camera flashes. More murmurs of "I didn't know he was seeing anyone, and she's beautiful, isn't she, and I thought he wasn't the marrying type." No one corrected the rumor. Not Antony. Not Alice. And the longer it went on, the more surreal it became. The way people looked at her. The way doors opened just a little faster. The way everyone suddenly listened when she spoke, even if she was just commenting on the wine. For one glittering night in Zurich, Alice Edwards vanished. And in her place stood Mrs. Giordano, mysterious, poised, silent but watching. Much later, after the last toast and the final handshake, when the ballroom began to empty and the only sound was the faint murmur of a string quartet packing up their instruments, Antony leaned in again. "You handled that well," he said. She looked up at him. "I didn't say anything." "Exactly." He stepped back. And for the briefest second, just one, she thought he looked at her not like a tool, or a mask, or an employee, but like a man who was starting to wonder what it might cost him if she walked away. Chapter 5, Not Just a Pretty Face. Alice woke to silence. Not the familiar kind, like the hum of airport vac or the buzz of a mini-fridge in an economy hotel. This silence was expensive: thick carpets, insulated glass, no neighbor's TV through the wall. The kind of silence that made you aware of your own breathing. She was in the upper level of the duplex suite, swathed in hotel linen finer than anything she owned, wearing a borrowed silk robe embroidered with the hotel's insignia. Sunlight filtered through linen curtains and landed in soft gold across the floor. For a second, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered the party. The champagne. The cameras. Mrs. Giordano. And the way Antony had looked at her, just for a flicker of a moment, like she wasn't a prop. The scent of coffee pulled her downstairs. She followed it barefoot, her heels dangling from one hand, still unsure whether she should be afraid, amused, or completely in over her head. Antony was already at the dining table, sleeves rolled, tie gone, reading something on a tablet while stirring his coffee in slow circles. He looked like he hadn't slept, and he didn't need to. "Morning," he said without looking up. "You mean bonjour, darling," she replied, voice dry. "If we're still keeping up appearances." That earned a smile. It was faint, but real. He gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit. Eat. The hotel insists on feeding you like royalty when they think you've married into a crime family." She paused at that. "Is that what they think?" "They think a lot of things," he said. "I let them." Alice sat. The plate in front of her was art, shaved fruit in spirals, smoked salmon folded like origami, a small quiche crowned with edible petals. The coffee tasted like it had never even heard of instant powder. She took 2 sips before she said, "Last night. You let them think I was your fiancé." He finally looked up. "Yes." No denial. No correction. That was the point. Of pretending. No. Of making them watch. Alice narrowed her eyes. Who exactly was watching? Antony set the tablet down. And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. Gone was the easy charm, the flirtation with glamour. What replaced it was something sharper. Calmer. Like the cold clarity of water that was too still. 3 men, he said. All sitting at different tables. All dressed like bankers or diplomats or investors. Not one of them paid attention to the music. None of them drank. Alice listened. They watched me. They watched you. And, more importantly, they watched who approached us, and who didn't. She set her fork down, appetite gone. Who were they? He looked her in the eye. Enemies. He stood and crossed to the far wall, opening a sleek cabinet she hadn't noticed before. Inside, files. Not digital. Old-school dossiers, some of them frayed at the edges, each marked with handwritten notes, initials, dates. He pulled one free and handed it to her. Inside was a photograph of a man in his 60s. Thick silver hair. Expensive suit. Eyes like a switchblade. That's Jörg Kritsch, Munich. Owns a chain of logistics firms. On paper. Off paper, he runs the Son von Eisen, an old East German syndicate that never quite died. He flipped the page. Another face. This is Emile Danton, Marseilles. Controls narcotics routes through the ports. Dresses like an art dealer. Kills like a bored child. Flip. A third man, younger, with slick hair and a watch that probably cost 6 figures. Mateo Novak. Croatian. Likes fast cars, expensive shoes, and private prisons. He doesn't want peace. He wants a seat at the table. Alice looked up. What table? Antony smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm building one. He walked to the window, looking out over the glassy surface of Lake Zurich. There are too many families, he said quietly. Too many silos. They bleed money on petty wars and decade-old grudges. A power vacuum opens, and all it does is pool in blood. She stood, slow. And you're what? Brokering peace? Mafia mediation. I'm trying to make chaos behave, he said. At least for long enough to get them all in the same room. She watched him for a moment. You sound like a politician. I sound like a realist. She stepped closer. And me? Where do I fit into this? He turned then. And something flickered behind his eyes, not cold, not calculating. Just tired. Like someone who'd been playing a long game and had just realized they didn't know what they'd gambled. You were meant to be a distraction, he admitted. A pretty face. A name no one would recognize. Alice didn't react. But then you spoke. And you watched. And you didn't run when you saw the gun. And you didn't flinch when they called you by my name. She crossed her arms. And now? Now, he said, stepping toward her, you're the only person in this city I can trust. She should have laughed. She didn't. Instead, she asked the one question she hadn't let herself ask yet. Who are you really? He held her gaze. And this time, when he answered, he didn't smile. My name is Antony Giordano, he said. My mother was British. My father ran Naples. I left the business. They pulled me back in. Now I'm trying to stop the killing before there's no one left to stop. She looked at him, long and hard. And said, okay. That surprised him. Okay. I'm not your girlfriend, she said. I'm not your fiancé. But I'm not leaving. He studied her. Why not? Because something tells me this gets worse before it gets better. And if I'm going to be in the blast radius, I'd rather be standing next to the man who lit the fuse. A pause. Then, do I get a raise? Antony laughed. This time, it was real. Double. Chapter 6, Caught on Camera. It started with a kiss. Just one. A moment on the balcony, barely 20 seconds long. There was music drifting up from the ballroom below, violin strings, mellow and distant. A lake breeze lifting the hem of Alice's borrowed silk dress. Her hand still holding the stem of a half-drunk flute of champagne. And then his hand had touched her waist. His lips had brushed hers. Lightly. Like a whisper too bold to be innocent, but too practiced to be new. She'd kissed him back. Just once. But once is enough when there's a camera lens trained on you from across the water. The video was online by morning. No watermark. No credit. Just a shaky 10-second clip posted to a gossip account with 400,000 followers and a flair for the melodramatic. Who is the mystery woman spotted with Antony Giordano, rumored mafia heir and international ghost? Video attached, #Mafia Mistress #Jet Set Drama #Who is she? Within an hour, it had been reposted to 5 more accounts. By noon, Alice's face was on the homepage of 2 tabloids, one American, one Swiss, with headlines screaming across the banners like accusations. The Mafia Mistress, mystery jet set beauty linked to billionaire crime family negotiator. Alice hadn't even had coffee yet. She saw it on her phone while standing barefoot in the suite, still in the robe, brushing her teeth. Her reflection froze mid-motion in the bathroom mirror. Mint foam on her lips. Phone glowing in her hand. She watched the clip once. Then again. And then a third time, slowly. Her face was unmistakable. Her profile in silhouette against the city lights. Her laugh as she turned her head. The press of Antony's mouth against hers. The angle wasn't even that great. Blurry. But you could feel it. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Jesus Christ, she muttered. She found Antony in the sitting room, already dressed, scrolling through his own phone with the grim focus of a man reading a war update. "You've seen it," she said, stepping into the room. He didn't look up. "It's been reposted 37 times. Alice crossed her arms. "Is this normal?" "No," he said. "This is intentional." She blinked. "Wait, you think someone wanted this video to go public?" Antony finally looked up. His jaw was tight. There was a tick just beneath his right eye. "We were on the 32nd floor, facing east. That angle. Someone was watching from the building across the lake. Long lens. Paid window access. Probably more than one photographer." Alice felt her mouth go dry. "But why?" "To expose you," he said. "To isolate me." That's when her phone buzzed. Again. This time, it wasn't Instagram or another breaking news push alert. It was a text. Unknown number. She opened it. "Time to quit the fantasy, sweetheart. Walk away. Quietly. Before they make it ugly." Her stomach turned. No signature. Just that single letter. But a few seconds later, another text came through. Attachment, PDF. Employment termination agreement. Non-disclosure attached. $250,000 severance. Do the smart thing. Alice stared at it. Antony was already at her side. He read the messages without asking. "Julian," he said. Coldly. As if the name tasted like poison. "Who is Julian?" "My stepbrother," he said. "The smiling one. Likes French leather and private poker games. He's always had friends in media." Alice looked at him. "He did this." Antony didn't answer. Just pulled out his own phone and started dialing. By noon, Alice's full name had been leaked. Her old airline tagged in posts. Photos from her social media, even ones from years ago, her graduation, her best friend's bachelorette party, a beach trip to Mallorca, were being reposted with red arrows and captions like "Is this her?" and "Exposed." Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The comments were worse. "Another gold digger. She knew what she was doing. Tell us the truth, Mrs. Giordano. She's hot, but dead in 6 months." Alice shut the phone off and dropped it into a drawer. Antony watched her from the doorway. "You can still walk away," he said. "Take the money. Take the offer. Change your name. Start over." Alice stared at the skyline outside. "You want me to leave?" "No," he said. "But I won't stop you." She looked at him, eyes sharp. "This was never just a job," she said quietly. "You never intended me to be invisible. You made me part of this. You used me." "Yes. And now I'm being hunted on the internet like a zoo animal." He said nothing. She crossed the room, picked up the remote, and turned on the news. Her face was already there. Blown up behind a suited anchor. Sources say she's British. A former flight attendant. The woman now being referred to as the Mafia Mistress. Alice muted the TV. "God," she whispered. "They've made me into a myth." "You were never invisible," Antony said behind her. "Not to me." She didn't turn around. "Then don't ever ask me to be again." That night, she sat alone in the master bedroom of the suite. The lights were off. The door to the balcony open. the lake breeze brushing against her skin. She hadn't taken the hush money. She hadn't signed the NDA. And she hadn't left. Instead, she pulled out the garment bag with the designer cocktail dress she'd worn the night before. Unzipped it. Took it out. And laid it across the bed like a costume she now had no choice but to wear. Chapter 7, Julian Carter, Slime in a Suit. The hotel's garden courtyard was designed to deceive. It looked like privacy, a lattice of trimmed boxwoods, a fountain murmuring like gossip, iron tables spaced just far enough to convince you your conversation was safe. Waiters moved silently in white gloves, and the table linens were thick enough to muffle dropped forks. But Alice knew surveillance when she saw it now. She could feel the eyes. And across from her, sitting with his ankle balanced on his knee and a glass of Lillet Rose in one hand, was the man who had made her visible. Julian Carter. He looked exactly the way you'd expect a billionaire's stepbrother to look, expensively casual, with the smug comfort of a man who'd been invited to every room before he even knocked. His suit was slate grey. No tie. Crisp open collar. Hair slicked with the precision of a man who used mirrors more than once a day. And his smile, God, that smile, was made to disarm. It was the kind that said I know something you don't, while also pretending he didn't. Alice had never met him before. But she knew this man. She'd served his type on flights. She'd dodged their hands at galas. She'd smiled at their jokes when their assistants winced. He was charm, weaponized. I have to say, Julian said, swirling his drink idly, you're even more photogenic in person. Alice didn't smile. You've seen the video, then. Julian grinned. Darling, I arranged it. He said it like he was proud. Like it was a favor. Alice didn't reply. A waiter appeared, too quiet, and placed a glass of champagne beside her without being asked. She didn't touch it. Julian leaned back, arms stretched along the sides of his chair, gaze flicking across her body with the casual ownership of someone assessing an auction piece. I thought you'd take the payout, he mused. You don't seem the martyr type. Alice folded her hands in her lap, steady. And you don't seem the type who sends NDAs before breakfast. Oh, come now. It wasn't personal. You were in the wrong place at a very inconvenient time. Think of it as damage control. You do a lot of damage, then. Julian gave a low chuckle. I do a lot of managing. My brother, well, half-brother, he gets a little reckless when he's playing kingmaker. I clean up. Smooth edges. Make the numbers look good. Alice's jaw tightened. You leak private footage and threaten women. He kisses people. Remind me who's the liability. Julian's eyes sharpened, just for a flicker of a second, steel behind the velvet. Then the smile returned. I can see why he likes you. His hand reached across the table, 2 fingers grazing her wrist as he tapped the rim of her glass. Alice didn't flinch. But she didn't pull away either. She looked at his hand like it was a snake in mid-coil. Let's be very clear, she said. I'm not his. And I'm sure as hell not yours. Oh, but you are someone's, Julian said softly. No one stays neutral in this world, Alice. Not for long. From behind her, a familiar shadow arrived. Alice didn't have to look. She felt it. Antony's voice came low and measured from her left. Not loud. Not rushed. But with that thin layer of frost that made your spine straighten. Julian. I didn't realize we'd sunk low enough to handle this like tabloid agents. Julian rose from his chair, too slowly. Brother. Antony didn't offer a handshake. Julian didn't seem to expect one. The air between them went taut. Alice glanced up at Antony. Gone was the composed strategist. Gone was the man who flirted with secrets and dressed them in silk. This version of him was leaner. Angled. Dangerous. Julian, unfazed, gestured at the table like it was a theater stage. I was just explaining things to your what, exactly? Assistant. Girlfriend. Accessory. Bit hard to tell these days. Antony's voice dropped. You shouldn't have touched her. Julian grinned. Relax. It was just a tap. I didn't ask for a lap dance. Antony moved then, fast. Too fast. He was across the table in half a second, hand fisted in Julian's jacket lapel, dragging him half over the iron chair. Alice's heart slammed against her ribs. Julian's smile never broke. That's more like it, Julian whispered. That's the man they're afraid of. Antony's hand tightened. You're making yourself very hard to protect. I don't need your protection, Julian said. But you need mine. Because those 3 families you're trying to bring to the table, they're already carving up your seat. And they think your new little distraction, he glanced at Alice, is the weak spot. Antony's jaw flexed. Julian gently uncurled his brother's hand from his jacket, finger by finger, like it was all a misunderstanding. Anyway, he said cheerfully, straightening his suit. I just wanted to welcome the new girl to the theater. He turned to Alice and winked. She plays well on camera. Then he walked off, drink in hand, as if he hadn't just set a grenade down and pulled the pin with his teeth. Antony said nothing. Not until Julian had disappeared behind the hedge-lined corridor. Then he sat in Julian's empty chair and exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding something in for years. Alice didn't speak either. She just watched him. Waited. Finally, Antony looked at her. There was no mask. No shield. Just the raw truth. I hate him, he said softly. Alice met his eyes. So do I. That's the end of this part, but trust me, the next one is even more thrilling. We drop fresh episodes every day, so don't miss out. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned, you won't want to miss what's coming next.
Because every broken heart deserves a comeback. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more emotional romance every week. Hit like, drop a comment, and ring the bell so you never miss a moment of romance, redemption, and powerful love. And don't keep the drama to yourself, share this story with someone who lives for twists just like you. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best comeback is becoming unforgettable.